Let's get spiritual, boys.
I genuinely believe, like, for AI, to me, what is it? It's the most important thing in human history. You cannot overstate how fucking mega what is going on it is to humans.
Our last invention.
Yeah, well, we're about to be the second most intelligent species on the planet. We haven't seen anything like this. Not since World War II. The Cold War was nothing compared to what this represents. They have a very serious competitor and they're losing.
Righto, money miners. What an intro, Rusty, Brice. I'm very excited to have both of you in a studio as we've got the dulcet tunes of Stone Jesus. Here come the robots. A timely suggestion, Rusty. I love it from you, and the both of you are with us because you happen to have different lenses on a topic we're very keen to explore, and I reckon our audience will be really keen to explore, and that's Here Come the Robots. I mean, we're looking at the forefront of some really big kind of technological changes happening, and these changes, they happen in an exponential way, and before you know it, the universe looks pretty different as a result of that. Our world looks pretty different. The mining looks different. Mining investment landscape looks different. So there's three themes that we're going to explore. These are three giant growth megatrends in that tech space, and we're going to just try and think like 15 years out from now. Think AI, robotics, and compute efficiency. Those are the three kind of growth megatrends. Going to have a drastic impact on all parts of our life, and I think we're going to try and explore the implications of that to the world that we operate in, being the mining space and the investment side. Both Rusty, you and Brice next to us have been thinking about this from your respective lenses. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
I should say, should clarify for the audience that don't know either of you. Rusty, you are a legend in the resources fund management game with performance that makes everyone kind of just be envious.
Well, that's $50 well spent.
And one theme I pick up, like, having known you for the last couple of years, is you're always thinking big thematics ahead. You're trying to kind of be early to the trends, and then you kind of work backwards with your portfolio allocation. And I know you've been thinking about these things a lot, and so we're hoping to couple you with Brice, who comes at it from a different perspective, not the funds management space, but instead, he's an entrepreneur in the mining kind of AI and technology space, but strangely he's also fit for the conversation because you've had experience in the robotics, the humanoid robotics side too, with a previous iteration of your startup, Brice. So both of you, I think, we're going to hope you bounce off each other and explore some of these topics.
The real world.
Yeah.
You're in the real world.
Yeah, well, look, when we started AI mining, that was definitely a non-consensus call. That was a bad idea pre-2016, but now it's all the rage and it's a popular thing. So, yeah, non-consensus calls is the way to do it, right?
Get after it.
Did they even call it AI in mining back then?
Well, yeah, see, data science was really, especially because we like to work with geologists. And so for them, a lot of this stuff was made in the 80s. This wasn't new at all. And so the real innovation was the compute, right? It actually wasn't AI science. And we kind of point to an innovation in 2016 where AlexNet was the first machine learning neural network to be ported onto a graphics compute card. So making it work on a GPU instantly made it 250 times more compute power applied to the problem. And from there, it's scaled out of control. And NVIDIA is what it is now because, that's the most efficient way. So whilst we can talk about software improvements in AI tech, right, like the hardware, the compute is a massive part of it too.
You don't get the software without hardware.
Mm-hmm.
We should just define some terms just to start with, kind of big picture. What the fuck do we mean by AI?
Well, I think it means a lot of things for a different context. So I think you're right. You could really simply just call AI a nonlinear multivariate model, right? It's not linear, it's not rigid, and neural networks are really common, but LLMs use a transformer architecture, which is kind of different. And in the past, there's a lot of architectures that have become not popular now, right? Like graph networks and LSTMs used to be all these different options. So really, as far as we see it from a commercial landscape and when we're looking for change, I think the way to look at it is that there is now a new level of software algorithms that can apply vast compute power to our problems. And so part of our thinking needs to be about what are these long-standing problems that maybe we've even forgot were problems and we've just so used to mitigating and working around those things that now we can revisit with this step change in application of compute power.
I find myself doing that in my own head with AI. Just things I've parked. I'm like, oh, that's too hard. Like, oh, no, I need to come back to that because you can think about it differently. I mean, I think, like, for full disclosure, I'm a full layman, right? This is not my area of expertise. It fascinates me enormously, and I hope this is like the first of many chats that you guys do on it, because I think this is the most seminal thing we've all seen in our lives. I genuinely believe, like, for AI, to me, what is it? It's the most important thing in human history. You cannot overstate how fucking mega what is going on it is to humans.
Our last invention.
Yeah. Well, we're about to be the second most intelligent species on the planet. And that has never, for all of modern human history, that has not been the case. So
that we know of.
Yeah, well, that we know of. Yeah, that's probably another show.
Aliens at the end. Yeah.
So AI to me is like just absolutely the most important topic you can consider right now as a business person in your personal life. Like, you can't understate how mega it is to get with the program. There will be two types of people, I think, in as short a time frame as like maybe 3 to 5 years. There'll be those that worked out how to utilize AI and, empowered themselves in a vertical in that sense. So from underneath themselves, they then multiplied out their capacity to do things. And then there'll be those that didn't. And those that didn't will by and large be displaced. And they'll have an opportunity to perhaps catch up, but you'll be a long way behind individuals that did. And I think to think about this, it's a non-linear sort of thing. Like, I think the example I gave before, and it's probably a poor one, but I'll try it again. If your mate starts learning French a year before you can start a year later. There's things you can do to catch up. It's you're set distance behind him. It's another human being. It's another human being. You generally learn at a similar pace, etc. It's pretty fixed. It's different in AI. The whole thing, if you make this work, the ramifications are exponential. You can have 1 million people working underneath an individual mind. And so the sooner you get with that, the better, because the gap from you to another human being in terms of your effective output is going to be so fucking big.
Put in a grounded camp to get maximum human output.
Well, wouldn't
on your mine site. Sorry to interrupt, mate. Check out this bloody accommodation expansion and wellness centre they've put together for FMG, mate. I'll tell you what, it's even making me not want to drink and get healthier. We've bloody got yoga mats, nice stone, just good quotes on the wall. Friggin' look at the grass, look at the gym, mate.
I want to work out there,
mate.
awesome.
I want to get healthy on a mine site, buddy.
How good is that?
Facilitated by Grounded, mate. They don't even need AI. They are the AI of accommodation. Accommodation,
the best in the biz.
Intelligence, AI. Let's get back to it.
So that's a really well-explored philosophy called an intelligence explosion. And whilst you can definitely look at what would happen if AI was able to iteratively improve itself, which is one of the things OpenAI is doing at the moment with ChatGPT, but we also don't actually know what the spectrum of intelligence looks like, right? You can look at our human intelligence compared to a chicken and say, is an AI going to be that much more intelligent than us? But it absolutely is exponential, and we can't really even fathom what 1,000 times more intelligent really means.
Yeah. Well, there's some fascinating play. I mean, arguably, it depends on how you measure intelligence. Arguably, in many ways, it's past most of us already. I think someone asked it a question like, what is the most unique thing about humans? Or I can't remember exactly how it was framed. And it sort of spat out that we're all self-domesticated. Like we self-domesticate ourselves. I was like, oh my God, that's so insightful. I can't imagine a human being ever actually coming up with that level of reflection. So, yeah, I don't know. It depends on how you measure it. Arguably, it's already past a lot of us. And the reality is it's going to get to a level very quickly in every field of endeavor where it's as good as the best humans on Earth.
Yeah, so
field.
Artificial superintelligence is a good way to define that, right? And you can talk to a lot of LLMs at the moment where if you're asking narrow in the field, you kind of are getting master's to PhD level responses. But the next step of AGI is about that overlap of having a PhD in everything and what can you put together that these individual experts never could. So yeah, like I think that is going to be upon us before we know it. So a horizon of 15 years is probably a really great one to speculate over.
Yeah, the interesting development I think with AI is like, what is the human interface look like? No doubt that will evolve. No doubt there will be components of the human interface today that also disappear as AI gets to manage AI with agency and derivatives thereof. But as far as I've sort of understood it, the human lens, certainly here and now, is absolutely required. AI is not perfect. It makes lots of mistakes. You need to keep guiding it. And so we're going to go through this evolution of the human and what value we bring to the table with how to manage AI. Like that, I think that's going to be the measure of how much utility you as a person has in the future, is how well you can manage AI.
Yeah, and not just manage, but grow personally with it and use it to augment your capabilities.
Augmentation is the right word.
Yeah,
100%.
This is a point you make, Brice, and that's the AI we all think of when we hear the word AI is our interface with LLMs at this point, because that's been like incredibly useful tool for anyone doing any sort of research and trying to disseminate their thoughts in a coherent way that people can explore quickly. But it's self-improving, like you say, Brice, and because it's self-improving, what industries are most vulnerable to disruption?
Look, I think there are some really core skills to being a human and having personality. And I like to map those out as intuition, hospitality, and artistic expression, right? Those are things that are uniquely human, and art isn't necessarily like songs or painting, right? I think your finance work, picking junior minors, that's an art, right? And so
definitely more art than science.
Yeah.
We all know that.
So those elements, I think, are intrinsically human roles, but there's a lot of things that are actually really much better for machines, and those are things that are monotonous, highly repetitive, things that need to be very precise, right? These shaky hands are only good for so much, and dangerous, right? If we can remove a human from a dangerous role, then that's a win all round. So you'll find that there's this really good overlap of those skills. And that really is, I think, where AI is going to augment a lot of people, right? And where a human can still have their intuition. Where do I want to dig? Where does that drill hole go, right? What political region do I feel like I can handle? And, take those overwhelming driving preferences. The completion, right, is going to be quite monotonous to go through that process where you want to be precise, avoid dangerous work. You can see robotics and AI actually allowing a lot of people this freedom to move forward. But what that means for capital structures and how you fund a lot of this stuff.
I think the answer to that question is actually everything. Like literally fucking everything. Every single thing is pretty much going to be impacted by AI. And then it's like really just like a hit list of what comes first. And I think mining, and why the discussion today is so pertinent, is mining makes sense as one of the priority places to go, right? Because the human interface in mining is high risk and high cost. So, and it is quite
monotonous,
labor intensive, or I guess so.
Yeah, load to plan, right? Dig to these lines every time. That's your job. Dig.
Yeah, it's very well suited to adoption there. Particularly around cost and risk. And I think if you're a board and you're sitting there and we know how risk averse that all is personal liability, etc. If you've got a place where you can choose between a machine versus putting a human at risk, you're immediately going to move to the machine as soon as there's any sort of cost parity or close enough. And on top of that, as soon as there's an economic incentive, it's not just parity, it's now like, oh, well, actually, this will work much more efficiently, then I think it's like a no-brainer. And where you started the chat today is the key thing, because there's these three things happening at once. We've got AI evolving at this rapid rate. We've got processing power, one of a better word as I understand it, evolving at this rapid rate, plus a whole different landscape in processing capacity alongside it, which is quantum, which is a whole nother thing, not even a progression. It's a whole universe different. And with those two things, though, processing capacity and AI, those are already happening and they're being applied in the digital realm. Those will then transfer and morph into the physical realm. And they're already happening. So they're already happening with robotics, but we'll see humanoid robotics applying those two. And then all of this transfers across to the physical. And that's when I think it gets really real for mining, because that's when you say, well, what, if particularly like as an underground ore body, for example, if I can send machines in to do what humans were doing, I don't have to run vent or, so air and cooling, and I don't need all the stabilization that I currently require. Because, okay, if I detonate 100 grams worth of robots, who gives a shit? If I kill a human, it matters. So suddenly those risk tolerances against the cost of ground support and all of those things, capex on your front end camps and all the rest of it, fly in, fly out, HR, IR, all of these things, lighting. These things operate in the dark. So
dark mines.
Yeah, there will be dark mines. There's already dark factories, so we're seeing those in China, like pretty amazing, pretty dystopian. But why? Lights are a human necessity. They're not these things they don't see. Not with vision like us.
I think the other part to dark mines in the context of underground, right, is, something you guys have covered a lot recently, is that we're running out of resources at the surface, right? We've kind of found at least the tier 1 big long life assets, and now we're forced to explore deeper and deeper underground. So I think one angle that this may manifest in that 15-year horizon is that the economics have to change. The reason we can't even explore at that depth is because if you find something, the cost of ventilation that deep, transfer, haulage, it all starts to just exponentially get more expensive the deeper you go. So if you're able to remove ventilation immediately from the mine design and capex structure, big cost removed, right? Remove all of the safety, the shelters, the O2 sensors and the camps, right? Yep. Now, all of a sudden, when you're doing that DFS study, right, you can actually have a completely different sustaining cost. And so then you throw on these new technologies. So muon sensing is a really big one in underground exploration at the moment. Just penetrates further and sees in a more cost-effective manner, is a simple description. But I think that these are the kind of things that are going to shape mines that will be different. And in a 15-year horizon, I don't expect that's to what the mining industry will look like. But I do expect there to be a couple innovators out there that have actually got at least one dark underground mine working like that.
I reckon it's going to be much sooner. I reckon it's going to... It's coming so fucking rapid, like so rapid. I think this is going to blow everyone's brains apart in the next 3 years, like so rapid. I mean, Elon's talking, and I think Elon is a guy you have to listen to, right? I think he's the most important human being that's, in my lifetime. The things he's doing with governance and the like, a whole different topic of conversation, but this is a human you have to pay attention to. His ability to think forward there's no one else on earth like him, and he is saying 90% of everything, every good, every service is fundamentally changing in terms of a cost structure, like almost to the point of there's a front end a humanoid has a capex component, an ongoing maintenance, and an energy cost, and that's it. So like once you apply that to everything you make, do any product, any service. He's saying 90% of things are effectively Nothing. They don't cost much. Now that's a fucking mind-blowing place to go. And I think it's happening. It's going to happen far quicker than we realize. These aren't that expensive to build, and that's the bit to watch. It's the robotics, because the AI and the processing power. I don't think there's any argument on that. That is. It's right in front of you every week.
It's all theoretically possible today, right? But I guess that the mining industry has kind of got a reputation for not adopting technology quickly, right? Like, you kind of expect an oil and gas company will give that a go before a mining company would. But I absolutely agree with you on the theoretical level. I don't think there's many blockers that mean it's not possible today. So what's the catalyst for this to happen?
It'll be the board. It's the board and it's risk. So it'll be so. There's carrot and there's stick. And yes, mining companies respond much more to stick than they do carrot. No one wants to take a risk. These are big, cumbersome, poorly run, generally speaking, bureaucratic organisations. And, why take a risk if it's only going to result in you losing your job if it doesn't work? And, no praise if it does, type of thing. That's kind of the mentality in big bureaucracies. And I think where that'll change, though, is at the board level. When they sit down and they read a board paper that says, I have to choose between sending a human underground to do that or a humanoid, how can you justify something that is cheaper, more effective, and critically doesn't put anyone's life at risk? That is the rub, and that is where I think we will see this move quickly.
Just a quick one, Rusty. Which country does it happen in first?
Ooh.
The highest cost countries, so Australia, Canada, wherever your labour rates are highest, and wherever your regulations and how it relates to you as a director and your personal liability is most extreme. So
like Australia in that, right? We're positioned pretty well both for the innovation and for the overhead.
As a country, we're doing everything possible to be as unfucking competitive as we can right now. Like the federal government, the state, you name it, right? They are doing everything under the sun to make us as uncompetitive as possible with energy policy, IR policy. It is mind-blowing how bad we are going. And don't even start about native title and the voice and these types of things. Thank God we dodged those bullets. But we are heading absolutely the wrong way on every metric. This will be an antidote to some of that in first world mining. And fuck, do we need it?
I just want to. We're getting real futuristic here. Like, what is this? What does a mine 15 years from now look like? What do we? So it's a dark mine. You think this is a possibility? Humans don't even need to be there.
Wouldn't be anywhere near the face.
Well, for underground, absolutely, right? So surface mining, open cut mines have a really good level of autonomy going, right? Like you can see all the tier ones have basically got their haul trucks driving around on their own. And even then, the light vehicles have amazing collision avoidance tech, which is all the kind of stuff you want to see in our current state. But even when that gets to full autonomy, the design of open cut mines doesn't really change, right? Like it's still quite, it's the way it is. So yeah, the opportunity I think in surface mining is really going to be about the current metal call factor. So one of these problems that I think the industry kind of forgets about is that when you look at what's in the reserve and what's actually making it into the mill, right, not even talking about processing efficiency downstream, there's a big gap that goes missing. And people have those contingency factors even built into, PFS studies that they pitch at PDAC because they know that's what they've seen in their career. So as we start to reassess some of these massive problems the industry has just been mitigating, right, I can see the metal call factor converging to almost exactly what's in the reserve is actually making it out the other side of the plant. And so that is really where surface mining is going to go. And, the OEMs in terms of that automation have got to make that cost accessible to the tier 2 and 3 smaller miners that can't afford that big CapEx layout. So that is a big part of where the capital structure, coming back to your key point, right? It's all about access to capital and cost-effective capital.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating who wins, who like it's all relativity, right? As to who's a winner and who's a loser. And yeah, I'd agree with you. And we're all guessing at the moment, right? Like this is guesswork at best.
Speculation.
It's speculation. So, but the marginal return feels like underground. You're going to get a lot more dividend than squeezing the lemon in something that's already big and semi-autonomous and low labour per unit moved from a tonnage perspective. With your big open cuts, feels like less juice to squeeze on that lemon. So yeah, for sure, it feels like underground. It's going to be so fascinating watching how this plays out, right? Because like for physical metal prices, do they go up or down? I think there's a debate about that. Like, depends on how fast this all comes in. There's a lot of deflationary factors at play here around the cost. And I think if you just step right back and go big picture, if you take what Elon's saying as correct, that 90% of everything, goods and services, becomes far cheaper, then humans have a great history of just consuming more, right? I would almost guarantee that is going to mean we consume more. That's going to mean we need more inputs. And so we're going to need more raw materials. The cost of producing them, though, should theoretically drop, but the margin made should stay the same, because at any given point in time, you need an incentive price off the cost. So the cost and the realized price, the cost aren't the key factors. It's the margin. It's the incentive margin. So I've been thinking about this because it's like, do you buy physical commodities? I'm not sure about that. Like, I don't know that plays out that well.
The history of technological innovation or productivity improvements in mining just makes more ore economic.
We've had 100 years of deflation in commodities. That's the reality. And I think that continues in real terms, right? Inflation adjusted. And I think that continues. But what does it mean something's worth in the ground? If you think of what something's worth in the ground is a function of the margin that it will attain when you pull it out. That margin, by and large, has to stay somewhat constant. There's always commodity price swings, but in order to get it out of the ground, there always has to be that margin, whether it's a 15% ROI, whatever the number is. So the value of that ore body shouldn't move too much. I'm still trying to...
Unless there's that change between open pit and underground, right? If underground improves on a cost basis, like you said...
At a relative level, as opposed to absolute.
And those ones become more cost competitive.
Because
That's fascinating.
That's how a lot of pit design works at the moment, right? Where you look at a resource and your ideal is that it's a massive open cut mine, because typically that's where your scale will allow the lowest all-in sustaining cost. But if it's just that little bit below the surface, that's not an option. And you've got this kind of like hybrid of, well, we'll do a small pit and then a portal and then we'll make it underground. Or if it's completely underground, then it's portal from day one. But that's all an economic decision-making factor, right? If the cost of moving rock changes, then all those shapes and the distances of depth of the ore defines that design and the effective all-in sustaining cost you can achieve.
And it's like, what are the constraints in underground mining? Often it's how many interactions are you having? What's your vent? All of those things kind of disappear in a world where it's automated and robotic.
I think so. I think they probably come in and out of your little ant infrastructure, more efficiently. I presume.
Well, one of
humans are pretty good, but we're not perfect. I mean, machines can do a lot of this stuff a lot better than us. I would have thought they're gonna work it out.
What I like about your ant point, right, is one of the other pit design techs we're seeing, which is less robotics and more just actual the design of your haulage fleet, is this ultralight class, right? So a lot of open cut mining went to ultra heavy class, right? And you see these 400-ton capacity trucks hauling ore, and it's amazing because you've only got so many drivers. But if you've only got 3 of those trucks and one goes down, you've just lost 33% of your capacity. Whereas in an ultralight paradigm, imagine you've got 50 cyber trucks, right? And the cyber trucks all have their own tonnage equivalent.
Couldn't agree more.
When one of them breaks down, it barely affects your capacity, right?
Look at the changing landscape in warfare over the last 3 years or whatever it's been now with Ukraine and Russia, right? All of it has gone micronized. Everything's gotten smaller. Everything's gone to drone tech. So it's going to be small, lightweight. Look at the insect world and how it operates. I think this is where we end up. It'll be, once you pull the human out of it as a necessary input, then I think you can reshape how you think about things quite dramatically.
Yeah, the war equation is also quite troubling, especially if we're talking 15 years in the future, right? I think to keep it on the tech end of this discussion, right? You guys put in your newsletter, we as acquisition of Micromine, like that was great to see you guys talking about the mining tech space. But I'm not sure if you saw, but Micromine actually tried to sell in the past recently to Aspen Tech, and that deal
Russia
was
got in the way.
Yeah, that deal was official as far as the party's concerned. It was at the governance stage, but the sanction phrasing is about anything that could support military activity. And obviously mining, they just look at that and they go, yeah, that's sanctioned. So it's really interesting to now think of cybersecurity and cyber attacks and where that actually may lead in a tenser geopolitical environment, and the fact that mining companies in this 15 years in the future paradigm, they may actually have to regularly defend their operating infrastructure. So, in our autonomous ideal, I think remote operated is still a big part of that. Mm-hmm. And so these IROCs, whether it's autonomous or remotely operated, right? We're going to still have to have these IROC centers. And I love that so much of the Pilbara is operated from the Perth CBD, right? It's showing how Perth is such a pinnacle of mining tech at the moment. But when we evolve these new techs like quantum, right? Quantum technology may be seen as a beautiful lock that's very secure to encrypt everything and keep your data safe, but it's also a lock pick, right? And the current RSA 256 hash encryption will just be unfolded by quantum tech. And so it's kind of this arms race. When one person has a working quantum computer, everyone else has got to have one. And I think it'll be another one of those overnight changes, right? Nothing's going to happen. Quantum's kind of still with fusion in that it's so many years away, but there'll be a catalyst, right? And it may be less than 15 years before you'll see it come into play.
Yeah, it's such a, What's happening with quantum is like a whole nother level of just mind explosion. Like, I still don't understand it. I still can't watch a YouTube video that makes it comprehensible to me. It's so
you can ask Perplexity to
I've tried. I've tried so many times with that. Make it simpler. But you're right. There's a whole realm there to unlock. Even if quantum doesn't happen, I think all of this around AI processing capacity and humanoid robotics, that's all happening anyway. Quantum's just another level of things to consider, which is pretty psychotic.
Yeah.
There are so many big picture things happening all at once. The geostrategic elements to this are really important to consider. We're in a multipolar world now. Everything that's going on is about the US v China. We haven't seen anything like this, not since World War II. The Cold War was nothing compared to what this represents. Russia, I don't think, was ever really a genuine competitor to the US. They have a very serious competitor and they're losing in many, many fields. So, this is a very different landscape. I would argue that the interface with Russia and Ukraine, all those things are actually derivatives of the bigger picture play, which is China v the US. And there is clearly a technology arms race that has been war has been declared on that front. And I think on mineral security and mineral processing, we are going to see war declared as well. For want of better words, without trying to be too hyperbolic about it, but the last the Western liberal sort of groups, be it EU, be it the Democrats within the US, I think they had a very, very poor policy set to try and take this on. The IRA was one of the worst executed policy pieces ever. It was like $1 trillion, and I think China went from like 65% of the refined lithium market to 70% in the 5 years. So like you spent all that money and you went backwards. If the end game was to pull China's market share lower. And I think that is the end game. And so I think we're going to see a lot more radical policy from the Trump side of things. And this game has only just begun. And that involves feedstock security and processing and how that plays out. There's a lot on that. But I would argue this: if you big picture and you say, 90% of all goods and services getting a lot cheaper, then where are you going to put capital to work? Well, you're going to chase hard assets. You're going to chase property, and you're going to chase minerals. I think, and you're going to chase collectibles, things that can't be replicated.
Putting more capital to work, chasing minerals. That's a bloody exploration playbook that K-Drill can facilitate for you.
Absolutely.
It's bloody, mate. Quality sample management, cost per metre, drill budget management, and just the long-standing exploration drilling expertise of
Rhino Sullivan.
Rhino Sullivan.
The man himself.
Oh,
Go K-Drill.
hit him up to find some minerals.
And
Can I give you an idea to riff off? If AI and like robotics is in a lot of ways, as long as you have access to it, this is a tremendous equalizer in terms of capability, right?
Yeah.
So what can actually differentiate the prosperity of a nation is the governance settings to let that capability prosper. Ask the AI to build your lithium refinery. Ask the, but as long as the governance can enable.
Well, ask AI to fix governance for starters. That'd be fucking great. And I think that's what Dogi's already doing, right? Like that arguably that's what they're doing. They're going transparency, awareness, change. And that has to happen, I would argue, to governance all over the West. We are hopelessly governed. Hopeless. And it's getting worse. And our competitive race with China, bizarrely, we're losing to a quasi-communist structure. Like, that is unfathomable from a Western mindset. And we're having to eat a lot of humble pie, and I think there's a lot of hubris in the West. We're struggling to accept this. It's a struggle to accept that we're not the smartest guy in the room, and that a non-democratic system is beating us. We have to get much better. And I think what Elon and Trump represent is the one chance we have to get much better, and it better happen soon, or we are so far behind. And the EU's already fucking gone. Like, they're so far behind. They're hopeless. Sorry, I know that's a long way off topic on AI, but
No, that's
a lot of these issues they're conflating, and they're all happening at the same time. And the chaos in markets that we're seeing at the moment, I think it's because everybody's like, whoa, this is tectonic. Like, everything is changing underneath our feet, and it has to. The US, the West, has been on a path of just self-destruction. We have deindustrialized. We've got horrific balance sheets. We're spending money we don't have, social security we don't have, an illusion of democracy in many respects under, entrenched bureaucrats that don't move, that aren't accountable. There's a lot to this, and bizarre that the change agent is Donald Trump. I'm happy to admit that that's an odd character to choose, but it is so necessary. And fuck, I hope they get it right. I just hope they execute quickly. We wear the pain. We've been living this unsustainable, government-funded GDP growth between fiscal looseness and immigration that are both unsustainable, whether it's Australia or the US, take your pick. These things have fed GDP prints and false senses of economic growth. And I think we're gonna wear this pain quickly. They're gonna do it quickly. They've got a midterm to get ahead of. I think that's a good thing. It feels bad in financial markets, but I think it is going to translate eventually to rotation of capital out of the US. 70% of every global equity dollar sits in the US. Having some of that go outside and look elsewhere, whether it's EM or hard assets like money, that's a good thing. Sorry, there's a lot of big picture stuff going on, and all at the same time we got AI playing out and big arms races and the cool thing for humanity, because that sounds very stressful and very change oriented, and everyone struggles with change. No one goes, yay, change. But the good thing is, I think ultimately this is going to make us far more productive humans, like at a global level. And I don't think anybody sits here today and goes, everybody should go out and cut wheat with a sickle because that employs more people. Right? That's not a good idea. We all know that. So equally, the idea of AI displacing jobs is a good thing, as long as we go find other things to do. So I think there's a lot of positives in this. It feels very uncomfortable, but I think there's a lot to be super excited about. And I think AI, just in the here and now, even without getting too forward looking, just at a personal level, I know I've felt it over the last 2 months, just embracing it and retraining my brain and being able to attack things that I otherwise would park or put off, because I feel now empowered by this army of intelligence and processing speed behind
Augmented.
me. Yeah, and that's here and now, right now, today. You as a human being in your personal and your professional existence, you can optimize yourself so quickly, and you can be such a more effective version of yourself right here, right now, and that's fucking exciting. Like I love that. I don't think there's any point in getting too scared or worried about dystopian outcomes because it's happening anyway. And it may all blow up in our face. This may be more dangerous than nuclear weapons. It very well may be. But, But
one of the things that is interesting about an AI kind of paradigm when you put it as a weapon is that a nuclear bomb does a lot of damage and it's a very terrible event and it's pretty clear who launched it, right? Whereas a AI cyber attack can actually do no damage to assets, right? And it's also very difficult to trace where it came from. So the threshold,
no physical damage.
Yeah. You can essentially turn off an asset and then maybe use it later if you like the asset, right? And I think that's coming into that cybersecurity point where we really do need to take that into consideration with the risks that we're looking at. And I think there's lots of opportunities to focus on in the landscape. But your point about democratizing and equalizing mining proficiency is a really beautiful one, right? Like when you're trying to collect data for geological observations, you don't want to be precluded from using certain instruments and measurement devices because that's proprietary and, it's some nation is hoarding that tech. The better we can come towards the way to operate a mine has uniform vendors, very well-established offering to ensure that you can customize it to that resource because it's our earth that's precious and unique, right? The way to mine it should just adapt in terms of the best science possible.
The implications on this pretty substantial technological seismic shift that is underway from an investment lens. Underground ore bodies become more attractive on a relative basis. There's maybe interesting optionality there. What else comes to mind from an investment lens, Rusty? You make money as a contrarian.
Yeah, probably a few ways to think about that. One's at the asset level. So yeah, for sure, I think underground v open cut has a relative advantage. Jurisdictional application will be interesting here. I can't help but feel like the first world is going to win on this one because it is high. It's a higher cost environment, so it makes a bigger difference.
That's a salient point, right? Because take lithium for example. A huge thing that kind of has been an overhang on that entire industry has been the fact that there's a lot of near surface, really capital light tons that can just kind of get up like that. But if we're uncompetitive doing those capital light kind of model in Western Australia because our labour costs are so enormously high.
Yeah,
you need these high OPEX, high CapEx as a result. But you have the equalizer, be it the technological productivity applied to the West, where easy wins are gone.
Oh, it'd be worth asking Billy Beeman what he thinks of some of this stuff. There's an argument here I know I'll get lots of knocks for this one, but there's an argument here at some point where you say, well, do you even allow open cut mining? If you look at mining's impacts, environmentally, the scar tissue is the hole itself and the waste right next door to it, typically speaking. And in big open cut settings, your copper and your super pits and they're not insignificant. I think mining's reputation gets it's overstated what an impact it has on the planet. It's about 1% of the continental landmass is impacted by mining. 50+% is impacted by agriculture. So I'd say that up front. But in terms of getting better results as an industry, I think there'll be a big argument to say, well, why, if you can suddenly cost effectively pull this stuff out from underground, and a huge chunk of the processed waste then gets fed back in. Well, isn't that going to be a significantly better environmental outcome? I think that's always kind of been the holy grail of mining. It's just that it's been very hard to justify. And if you look at an asset like NextGens, that tells you, right? If you've got the margin, you can do it. it's just a cost function. And if suddenly those underground ops become way more cost effective on a relative basis, then that I think that could be a really great thing. Like I think we'd all love to see that.
Nobody would say no to that, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. Like,
Yeah.
it'd be so hard to justify going and ripping big, generational scar tissue on the surface of the earth if you don't need to. I'm not here to throw stones at that either, right? That's been a necessary part of human endeavour. And as I said, it's 1% of the surface of the earth that gets impacted. So,
And it's a reflection of humans' demand as well, right?
Totally. And those things will remediate over time, and they will, and the earth will do its thing. In a geological sense, in any sort of universe sense, we're irrelevant. It doesn't matter. But without getting too esoterical, I think it's just going to be a far better outcome if you're running underground mines and you're putting a really high portion of your waste back into that environment in a solid manner that's it's not water soluble, etc. Then that's going to be a great outcome. And mining all of a sudden as an interface at the surface, which is where people feel it, where like competing land use issues, whether it's like tourism or agriculture or whatever, suddenly there's very little surface expression. Suddenly, like, are you really a competing land use? You shouldn't be. So, I feel like social acceptance towards mining could get a lot greater. That would be a great thing too.
Yeah,
and that again, first world, because that's where these things get roadblocked the hardest.
Yeah, and maybe it speeds things up, right? We go back to the government and getting approvals and all these things, and we all know that it takes 15 plus years in the Western world from discovery to getting a mine started. We can cut that down. It's relevant to everything we've said, economics, the whole suite of it.
Yep.
It all kind of ties in there. So it'd be
Yep. I reckon, if you're running a big mining company today, this should be the first thing you talk about at every quarterly. I can't see how AI is not the most important thing you're discussing. Like I've said to all my staff quite brutally, hey, I will make you redundant before AI does if you don't do your AI training every day. So we have and I like to think of a pretty mellow person to work with up until now. But I'm so passionate about this. Like if you don't embrace it, and we've got people that are 70 years old in our organisation. I won't name anyone, Dougie. And embracing AI and just doing it day in, day out is going to differentiate where you land. And that applies not just to the individual, but to the organisation. And big companies need to be talking about this front and centre. And it's going to be fascinating how these competitive landscapes evolve, because small teams, single-person teams, small human teams are going to be so much more efficient than big bureaucratic encumbered organizations. And I'm going to love watching that journey. Like that is going to be so fucking cool.
When did you come to this realization? I'm really curious. Like when did it hit you that AI is the thing?
Like before I rang you guys and said, let's do it. Let's do a piece, boys. Come on. It's certainly over the Christmas break. I had I feel like Christmas is just such a great time of the year to just sit back and watch as much cricket as possible and just clear the brain and just think as laterally as you can. And I do that in a few different ways. But it was probably over. It had been simmering away for probably 6 months. And then at that Christmas break, I felt like I had time to crystallize a bunch of things. And as it turned out, the team, Dan and James in particular, came back from the break with the same landings, which I was stoked about. So I was like, hey guys, this is where my head's at. This is how I'm seeing things. Do you think, am I off piste here? And yeah, it wasn't the case. And I think, we have, for us as an organisation, we're doing an enormous amount of work at the individual level. So like mandatory daily training. Like we are all starting just grassroots, the Google online academic sort of platform, just get the basics right, build the foundation at an individual level. And, James is ex-Goldman Sachs data analytics, so he's at a different level, but we're all working together at the basics, and then we'll find, I think, routes where we can specialise and train in areas that are going to help us within our own specialisations. But yeah, as an organisation, that's where we've started at the individual level, and then we've done a huge amount of mapping around our systems and processes and trying to prioritise where it is we embrace AI and spend time and some capital to make that happen as quickly as we can. And so we're already using it. And specifically, this is around real time data analytics, so to speak. So and I'll use words wrong and probably get lots of comments about this. The vernacular, I'm sure I'll cook it, but the premise is like our job is pretty simple, right? We have a chunk of capital to invest at any given point in time, and we ask two pertinent questions through the day, and that is, first of all, do we own something that we no longer should? And then secondly, because the first thing you want to do is look at your portfolio. That's the be all and end all. The rest of it's just noise. It's what you own that matters. So first of all, do you own something that you no longer should? And then secondly, is there something that you don't own that you now should? And that's how we're thinking about it. And that's very simple, but it needs to happen in real time. And so where we're trying to get to is like this army of analysis, if you like, that is in real time telling us with a different lens. So you can conceptualize an investment model in many different ways. And I would say in different macroeconomic climates and commodity climates and market climates, different models might work. Like, for example, in a fizzy bull market where uranium's $150 a pound, and any uranium, you're going to just chase any deal you can. So you're going to optimize for like access to deal flow, and that's a very unique. That's not my DNA, but at a certain point in time, that might make sense, and there'll be a lens for that. Then our DNA is more in deep value, counter-cyclically looking at things. So tell me something that's deep value as we perceive deep value to be. So let's define that. That's like, pristine balance sheets, ideally the commodities trading into the cost curve, because that's when we tend to find associated low valuations. Prove that we have low valuations. Show me, PEs or whatever the case may be. Ideally, they're also in a Q1 or Q2 of the cost curve, so they're bulletproof if this gets worse before it gets better. So it's like defining those characteristics that are a model, and then trying to sort of press the button at any given point in time and say, that model, and that model I think are relevant in this climate, and tell me all day, every fucking day, wherever, whenever, when something is of interest. And that's a sort of screening process. And then it still requires the human interface to check that screening and make sure that that's done the way you think it should be, and it's been, it's got the right answers. And then you go get your three best ideas, and then go have the bottom up, workflow where you start with three pieces of analysis from research houses or brokers, sell side, shortcut your way around that work stream as much as possible, chuck that into your own model, have the meeting with management, do that ground up work. But do that, but critically shortcut your way to that list of three names really fucking quickly on like a daily basis.
That perspective reminds me so much of Stanley Druckenmiller, absolute legend in all respects in our investment game, and clearly traded the whole AI thematic phenomenally himself. But he talks about, in a recent interview, the ability to integrate AI into decision making as an investment manager, and he thinks like the ultimate investment decision making will happen with the augmentation of AI.
Augmentation for sure.
Over the intuition that comes with the reps like he
This
has.
is fascinating, right? And where I think getting with the program is so important, because there is a role for humans here. We will be displaced if we don't embrace the augmented AI. But there is a role, and I think AI is a construct of us, and it's a reflection of us in many ways, and it works within, certainly as I've understood it, and tell me if I get this wrong, but within the language models, it works within a set of data that is a reflection of everybody's thoughts, so to speak.
Yeah, one of the earlier ChatGPT bots was basically just Reddit, right? And Reddit had some real curly opinions in dark corners that would come out from time to time, right?
Yeah.
So a big part of the modern LLMs is something called human feedback reinforcement learning.
Yep.
And it's where they've kind of really essentially guided it to respond in a certain way, the way that it'll repeat back the question and.
Yeah, so interestingly, like what we're seeing at the moment in our experience is like it's not I don't think it's in a place where it can think counter-cyclically because it's digesting what's out there that's a reflection of the other human thought. So let's say everybody hates PGMs at the moment. There's any amount of analysis that says PGM sucks. You go put your AI through that and it's just going to reflect that. So in many ways, I think AI at the minute is kind of a reflection of consensus, if that's the thing you're trying to do with the AI. So it's helpful, but it just boils down consent. It doesn't help you think counterintuitively or countercyclically. And I think that's where the human interface plays a real role. And if you can then guide it in that direction or just do it yourself and say, well, I don't give a fuck if you think that. Like, just go and give me the best names anyway.
You give it the data of how you've invested historically, and maybe it can understand your style and how that
that's
sort of correlates.
That's a work stream where I've been asking for nearly a year.
Yeah.
And we haven't been able to get there yet. I think it's not as easy as it sounds. Like I just keep banging the table and saying, why can't I just chuck in the spreadsheet with all the, it should go correlate. Yeah. What were the commodity prices at the time?
The Nero
that's
AI,
definitely,
that's your one. That's your proprietary.
In our work stream, in our sort of checklist of things we want to get done, that's right up there.
So this is part of the innovations that I'm seeing in our current moment that are really exciting. So one of the more recent papers is about a model consensus protocol. And this is essentially this protocol for how large language models in particular should be accessing certain platforms. So you should see this integration on, maybe Slack or Notion or any of your other big apps. But the purpose of it, grander, is to go to those on-prem databases where like a drill hole analysis database would be a good example in mining, where you want the mining company to have their own LLM that's still got a lot of the language and skills from the base level, but it can access your data. And if you can imagine integrating that with a data lake where the mine plan is there, where you've got all the operating specs and even your maintenance and CapEx, that is where accessing that large language model, right?
This is where there's like a bit of a CapEx piece for so there's like a heap of third-party stuff, right, which you can grab and plug in and optimize yourself with right now.
Yeah, DeepSeek in their open sourcing is a good example for today.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is really interesting because there's also your own universe where you can create your own learning. And I will fuck this up with vernacular and how I explain this, but yes, your own pool, and then utilize AI to analyze that in real time. So we are looking at exactly that, but it is a CapEx piece.
Alpha, right? You've got to keep alpha on your own servers and don't let anyone else have access to alpha.
Exactly. So what defines like a fund's competitive advantage? It's the funnel of information that you as a fund get. That's deal flow and information. You as a fund get better access to that theoretically than other people. If you don't, then you shouldn't be doing it. It's then taking that funnel and distilling that to competitive advantage. So you got to translate that to a knowledge, and then you got to translate that to a competitive advantage. But to do that, that's your own ecosystem. And that's all your inbounds. Like you guys would see this, right? Like your daily inbounds on email, all the different investment banks, and it's real time. That stuff doesn't turn up in Bloomberg necessarily or S&P in these data banks that you can plug AI into now. That's not necessarily that real time flow isn't necessarily hitting those data banks in real time. They're sort of backward looking, and I would argue they probably remain so. Whereas you as a fund have this flow of information, you're then exchanging it internally, whether that's through WhatsApp or whatever other means of communication you have, email, etc. But you should have AI plugged into that unique ecosystem of your own, and that's exactly what we're mapping.
Yeah, and that same concept of the alpha for investing is exactly what I'm seeing in mining tech solutions as well, right? Is that if you have a domain expertise and you're able to serve the entire global mining industry, you develop this capability that is just unparalleled, right?
Does the
And-
miner, or do you own the data?
Well, I think that when you talk about the raw data, that the miner always needs to own the raw data, and that's really a big part of what things like GDPR are doing for personal data at this point in time. But when it comes to the process data, right, the actual wisdom that can be imparted on by a domain expert, which at this point is still a combination of a human and AI. But in the future, right, you could have completely autonomous organizations offering services to mines, which is basically just input your data here and your knowledge comes out this side, right? And that could be almost completely autonomous, right? It's a big part of where I see the mining tech landscape going at the moment. And especially when you look at, what could be happening in surface mines, there's a lot of autonomous tech now that's going down the production drill holes and scanning them, right? The production drill holes are way cheaper because they're just, big air drills, they're not diamond core, and they're at a really tight spacing. So from a geologist point of view, it's an amazing opportunity to get a much tighter view of the resource and make sure that you are actually sending the right material to the mill and getting this higher metal call factor recovery of your reserves. But at the moment, where a lot of this tech is going is that it's got that regulatory hurdles. And so that's really exactly where we've got to come back to this core point of how do we ensure that the board is going to look at these opportunities and go, we're going to push for this, we're going to do this innovation.
Yeah, it's interesting. I reckon like the dark art here is going to be whether you're an investor like us or a corporate and an operator, a mining company. It's going to be like how do you utilize AI in a bespoke way to your own data lake? That's the only moat that you own here. That as far as I can see. It's not going to be like, how do I apply, some really smart thinking to a universally available pool of data that everybody's going to be racing at the same time for that. So it's like, how do you define your own data lake, and then how do you, build the AI infrastructure into that? And it's a hard one. Like we're working through all of that because there's a component of capital required to do that. These things aren't cheap, and then you don't want to invest that capital and 6 months, 12 months later have it, redundant because there's something off the shelf or whatever. So
yeah,
I don't have all the answers. We're
is it not
working our way through.
like to the point of the technology being an equalizer in some respect? Like, do our markets not just get tremendously more efficient because kind of everyone's got? I know there is still a moat in the fund with its own information and synthesizing all of that, but
you would think so. I reckon the really interesting part for commodities is that it's such an unsexy part of the equity world. As an asset class, no one gives a fuck about commodities. Well, we've got 70% of every equity dollar globally sits in the US, and some huge fraction of that in the Mag 7. So like the concentration of capital is massive. No one's really looking at the sector. It's an enormously specialized space. Like the knowledge required to really land somewhere informed, I think, is enormously specialized. And so I reckon there is this window here to get this right. That's what excites me, I reckon, coming back from Christmas and being like, oh, yeah, no. I'm pretty pumped about getting this right in our space because it isn't sexy. Resources, commodities, mining, it's never been sexy. So I feel like we're going to get a bit of a longer window maybe to apply all the stuff that the tech side of things is bringing, because the tech side naturally applies it to its own environment. So like where have we seen AI applied first? It's like, oh, it's in coding, it's in graphics, these are all like tech places because that's just a natural thing for them. It's their ecosystem. I feel like we get an opportunity, particularly in mining finance, to get really lateral, and I think I don't think mining is going to become sexy tomorrow. So that excites me. I feel like that's cool, and like you guys would know this so well, right? Like information asymmetry there's nowhere I know of where it exists more than in mining, and maybe that's a function of how many small caps we have. I'm not sure, but without question, it exists as you go down the market cap curve, and I think that talks to like incentives and why It exists. I think that will stay that way. And if you can get even better at thinking outside the square, then great. The next step is probably like, how do we then interface that? And that's certainly something, I know we need to do a lot better. Is like, how do we then interface that back to the market to say, hey, you've missed something. This is you should allocate capital here. That bit, I think, in small cap mining, we could do way better. I would argue that we see companies and assets that shouldn't get funded all the time, and we see companies and assets that should get funded not get funded. And so I would say, like, the efficient allocation of capital in metals and mining, there's a huge room for improvement in doing that.
Is mining not being sexy just from that capital allocation perspective? Right?
No one wants to go to a fucking dinner party and say I invest in mining. No one. It's like saying I pick up the garbage.
Hey, try saying you're a podcaster.
It's not working for you, mate.
Yeah, I find I really have a love for mining, right?
Yeah,
And
me too.
maybe I'm one of those rare people who think it is sexy. But when I look at everything in this world, especially the more tech we've got, right? There's so much copper we need for this clean energy transition, and nuclear is a massive part of that, right? So we've got to get our hands on all the nuclear resources too, and work out that supply chain to turn these raw minerals into the products we need to advance and grow.
Yeah.
Right? It's an immensely cool journey that I think I'm really proud to play a role in. So particularly when you see it from the perspective that all of these resources are 1 in a billion occurrences, freak events that happened millions of years ago in our Earth's formation. You see them as unique. And I think that's why I love working with geologists, right? They have this real respect for the resource. They love not only to discover it and define it, but protect it, right? When we're mining, I know that some people can see a giant hole in the ground as a scar on the earth, but I've seen some massive pits in my time, and they are feats of engineering.
I reckon
right?
I come across geologists all the time. They don't want to see it mined. They love the ore body itself. It's a bit like the golf course curator. He doesn't want to see anybody out there playing fucking golf. He's cutting up his course. I share the love, and like, I like being in an unsexy industry. I reckon it's rad. I love going against the grain. I think it takes way more. I just got mad respect for anybody who does it well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I agree with you. I think the sector is so important. This fallacy that we see permeated time and time again from groups like the EU, that we can live in some, world of fully self-sufficient recycling, is just fucking fantasy. Yeah. It is utter fantasy. And we've barely scratched the surface of the earth, really, with mining. There's no true limitation to what we can access. It's just a cost function. There is no peak oil. There isn't. There are enormously abundant quantums of resource available within the planet, and it's purely a cost function to access them. And without question, I think we're going to need a lot more energy and a lot more commodities, because we've got a lot of people still to pull out of poverty, a lot of people just to get to a reasonable living standard. And then we've got the first world going to a place of energy intensity that it never had before. We're about to jump a big quantum leap in energy usage per person because of data and because of AI. And I unashamedly think that's a good thing. There's nothing bad about that. I know we'll get lots of climate change arguments. Climate change is probably the worst used vernacular I've ever seen. Climates change. That is a fundamental tenet of existence on this earth. Change. And so it's one of the worst misuses of verbiage I've seen. And the things that we can do is just get better at being industrial. If you're a true environmentalist, mining is a key function in a lower impact on the planet. And I know that sounds very counterintuitive, but a true environmentalist, in my mind, wants the most energy efficient system, agricultural efficiency. So get the fuck off the land, intensively farm, get the most out of your interface with the land as you can. Live in cities and in urban environments. and then leave as much of nature untouched as you can. That's a real environmentalist, and that involves nuclear and energy efficiency and all of these sorts of modern things that we're all doing, and yet bizarrely the left continues to seem to fight us on and sell this idea that this fatalism and we're all fucked and humans are out. It's just garbage. The best thing we can do is keep being progressive, keep digging holes, keep getting better at it, keep educating people. If you want to get human impact lower, less people is probably a start. And the key to getting less people is actually rising GDP and education. So, sorry, I know that's way off topic, but
let's get even more philosophical, Rusty. In an AI augmented society, where does capital flow?
Oh, this one's. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier. I saw Elon made some comments like, "Do we even need money?" I was like, "Whoa, okay." I think that might be. We probably don't have to jump there. Let's say on the path to 90% of everything getting fundamentally cheaper, and you got this pool of capital. It's like, well, where do you allocate it? What do you do with it? I would say in terms of asset classes, you're going to chase assets that you can't create, goods and services that you can't just create. So collectibles, i.e. pieces of art, they're going to, you're going to chase those. They're one-offs by definition. Hard assets, I would think property. Like you're going to scramble for property globally. You're not making any more earth. And I think that equally applies to commodities and ore bodies, things that are in the ground. So I and then beyond that, I don't know, extending your existence for a few thousand years and these sorts of concepts. It's going to be a fucking mind blowing world. I mean, like you can start having conversations around this concept of human ascension and like, do you move from the physical to the sort of metaphysical?
Yeah. Well, one interesting AI concept is to replicate your consciousness on a computer, right? And you can have this debate about whether it is conscious or not. But what's interesting is that it's a program running on a computer that's powered by electricity and that costs money. So even if you can emulate your consciousness, you still have to have a job. You still got to pay outgoings, right? And you kind of ascension in all these AI sense is always still constrained. And so I like that idea of exploration, right? And hopefully where the capital flow when real estate starts to get really high and if we struggle with our commodity problems is to colonize on other planets, right? And another potential part of that commodity mix is asteroid mining. There's so much metal out there in the rest of the solar system and it doesn't have those environmental constraints as far as we know. There's no life out there. And it's really interesting to think, how a supply and demand curve could change if you all of a sudden discover 10 times the amount of copper that's ever existed on the Earth in a low-hanging asteroid, right? And so you add that in with also trying to expand throughout the solar system. There's some pretty cool moons near Saturn as well that we could colonize. And it really is important to de-risk our only one planet that we're currently not looking after the best by expanding and colonizing the rest of the galaxy.
Was it Bezos that was talking about that? Were you guys?
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
Bezos was saying
get rid of all the emissions-intensive industries, put them out there, because everyone that's ever gone out there looks back at Earth and says, hey, it doesn't get better than this. This is the one.
So the planet becomes a national park, and
That's
then it's interesting. I don't mind like the starting premise that the planet becomes a kind of a national park. I think there's some merit to that, but I think if we step back through the conversation we just had around like underground mining and how low impact you can make it, how's that going to compete from a cost function point of view with going all the way to a bloody asteroid or another planet and pulling what are vast sums of rock back to, or even refined metal back to planet Earth. I to me, that intuitively feels like that could be a long way away, and I feel like we can interface with the planet we have far better and with much less impact.
But if we're trying to live in low Earth orbit, actually lifting the metals off the ground to put them into low Earth orbit is incredibly expensive. So it makes more sense to pull them out into orbit. So that whole low Earth orbit kind of habitable zone, it's got to come from asteroid mining, right? And like, again, you essentially have those two commodity prices of where is it located? Is it on Earth in the gravity well, or is it in low Earth orbit?
Any colonization elsewhere, like any other place other than planet Earth, and the raw materials required for that process will not come from planet Earth. I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah.
I hope we're all around to see all this stuff. Like, I think this goes like, where do you spend your capital? Well, other than sort of asset allocation and trying to get return, you might. What I just explained, people might just go, I don't give a fuck. Like, I don't need any return on capital. I'm pretty self-sufficient, or, it doesn't cost me much to live. Maybe you're prioritizing your wellness and your longevity, and we're seeing huge floods of capital into living for massively extended periods of time in various ways, shapes, or forms. I could definitely see that as a place that people start really getting after, and particularly when you apply AI into that, like the medical space. I would love to. I'm sure there'll be many podcasts out there on that, I'm sure, but without question, right, we're going to advance those fields pretty quickly, I think, from here. So
living forever sounds a bit dystopian to me, Rusty. But
you get stuck into concepts like what is this, and what's on the backside of this, and should you really live here forever, and all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. So there's so many fascinating big picture questions, and I think we're going to get so many more answers to the universe. Like, it's such an awesome time to be alive. Like, we've gone through this period where I think science has like demystified the mystic part of humanity, if you like. So that, it used to be like a lot of faith, like a lot of religion, and a lot of these sorts of things dominated human thinking. I think science has smoothed a lot of that out, if you like, over time. I think the fascinating part of science at the moment is like in the quantum realm, it's sort of remystifying things. So we've gone from this place of like, we sort of understand it all, we get how it works. You guys are dreaming, what you're thinking with your 3,000 religions. Suddenly we're like, quantum is telling us that a particle can communicate with another particle in some other part of the universe, or without any sort of physical, tangible cause and effect. Like, what the fuck? So
it's a simulation layer.
Yeah, the simulation
theory. The simulation layer.
Yeah, there's such cool stuff coming out of science now, ironically, that is almost remystifying our existence and our universe. And I find it fascinating. I'd sort of always grown up quite sort of atheist in a way, and I think as time's gone on, I look at like every human civilization that we're aware of has found some form of deity. Why is that? That's a remarkable coincidence. Now, clearly, they can't all be right, but an atheist suggests they're all wrong. Is it just an interpretation of the same thing in different ways? And then, religions, as they do, anything that controls people gets manipulated, et cetera, and they form these different things. But the sheer fact that every civilization finds deity, why is that? That's a fascinating concept, and so I wonder if science is actually leading us to a place of reacquainting ourselves with this mystic side of the universe, if you like, and through quantum and sacred geometry and these sorts of places. They're fucking awesome. There's so much cool shit.
Do you ever worry? I've thought a bit about this lately. You go back sort of 300 or 400 years and you think about, say, Europe, the Catholic Church, people like Galileo getting completely chastised because they didn't agree, and he was coming from a scientific sort of basis, and that wasn't what the herd thought was right. And I reflect on like where we are today, and this is really paraphrasing people far smarter than I am, but they think about the scientific community and how much people can be chastised for climate change, like you said earlier, and thinking different. Is that something you think about much?
It's a huge issue. It's like anyone who says the science is settled is immediately unscientific. Science, by definition, is the constant re-questioning of kind of assumptions. And anything that has a forward prognosis, which climate change does, you can't say it's never settled. It's all it's correlation, causation. These are all models and guesswork. And I grew up. I mean, you guys would have experienced it, acid rain and CFCs, and we move from one fatalist concept to the next, and it happens that this time they've called it climate change. I think that there probably is correlation around global warming. Is that going to eat the planet alive? No, the planet's had heaps of carbon throughout its history, much higher than it does today. Got on just fine. Crop yields actually go higher. Places greener. Like I think we're going to get in a conversation that's hopefully far more open-minded and questions things. And even like COVID, and I feel like, and I don't want to sound too conspiratorial. I'm sure I do. I'm sure I'll get lots of shit for this, but I think you have to question a lot of the authority regimes in the West and how groupthink gets applied, and you're not allowed to question things. Well, as it turns out, like a lot of those questions were pretty fucking well founded. So yeah, I think I hope that we are in a place where we can have more honest conversations around things that aren't set, they aren't defined. We're constantly learning. We should be constantly reevaluating, and that's okay. Uncertainty is fine. I think humans very naturally gravitate towards this want for certainty, and it's a bullshit illusion. The only certainty we have is uncertainty, and we have to just live with probabilistic estimations. There are no actual hard things. I mean, like you said, 400 years ago, everybody thought the Earth was flat, right? That was like the best minds on Earth assumed that was the correct way of thinking. When you look at that now, it's like laughable. These weren't unintelligent people. We haven't like remarkably gotten smarter over 400 years. It was just dogmatic thinking, and I hope that I think the connectivity of the internet. I think things like podcasts. Like I feel like media has let us down in so many ways. It's become such a part of the establishment, and I feel like now there's so many more ways to connect and have conversations that are a bit awkward and a bit difficult, but be far more open-minded around possible outcomes. And I reckon that's such an awesome thing. You guys are like case in point. You guys are literally a case study in that. And I think when I first even rang you guys and said, "Oh fuck, I would really love to meet you," because the thing I loved, the thing I was drawn to was like you're having conversations in the open that we were all having behind closed doors. No one was brave enough to come out and talk publicly about a bunch of this analysis. And I think that's an awesome thing, like transparency. And back to like Elon and Doji. Transparency brings awareness, and awareness brings change. And all we're trying to do, I think, as a species is just get better. Like I think we can all agree on that. And I think the key elements to that are transparency, awareness, and change. And I think the modern era is bringing those levels of transparency. We're no longer getting dictated to by governments and central organisations. And I reckon that's a fucking remarkably good thing. The smaller we can make governments, the better. The more efficient we can make them, the better. The more we can free think and innovate and be human, the better. So, yeah, I'm pumped. I love where we're going. It feels very uncomfortable for some people. It blows my mind that very rational people feel very uncomfortable about these things.
I think that's a pretty mystical place to end the conversation, Rusty, Brice. It's been an absolute pleasure having the both of you to explore this new territory.
Thanks so much for having us, and thanks so much for being open to having these chats, mate. I love it.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Anytime, gents. Thank you so much. Hootaroo.
Hootaroo.
Righto, there you go. Rusty's looking better than ever.
Yeah, there was plenty for people to chew on in there. It got me thinking. All right, so I reckon we can leave it at that. And I'm keen to hear what the money miners think. There was so much in that, such a different style of conversation. It's always good to hear what people like Rusty and like Brice think about the industry and where it's going and everything. It was a truly wild conversation, I thought.
Yeah, I was watching CNBC last night and they had Jensen Huang on from NVIDIA, and mate, is the feeling you get talking about their growth and everything with their AI chips that they've got, and It is, yeah. It's friggin' interesting to listen to. So you're talking about NVIDIA growth outlook. It's like, well, they're leading the pack with these friggin' AI chips that are all going to be feeding these data centers. So, yeah, it is a fascinating industry.
Without doubt. Keen to see what it does to our industry, hey?
Yeah, very much so. Right, you don't need AI to get $100 off an IM underground operator's ticket. You don't need it. Go to the link in the show notes. It's coming up soon. Mate, we've also got, GRX discounts for the Osmine IM conference in Brizzy mate. There's just discounts flying everywhere. 190 or 160 off that if you remember. Mate, and our great partners as always that just, they don't need to do discounts because they're so bloody good, but they probably do it anyway. Mineral Mining Services, Grounded, Sandvik Ground Sport, CRE Insurance, K-Drill, WA Waterballs, Swick, Quattro Project Engineering and Cross Boundary Energy. Hooroo.
The information contained in this episode of Money of Mine is of general nature only and does not take into account the objectives, financial situation or needs of any particular person. Before making any investment decision, you should consult with your financial advisor and consider how appropriate the advice is to your objectives, financial situation and needs.